like some. Okay, welcome to the Super Coach Experience. It's your boy Tim. I'm coming back out of the bubble for a little bit just to talk some punting with my man over here, Jacob, from the TryPod Punting Forum. Obviously, with Super Coach 2 weeks to go, with finals coming up, there's not much Super Coach left, so a lot of people are starting to think more about betting and obviously wanting to get those bets right. So hopefully our man Jacob can try point us in some of the right direction and give us a bit of insight to the way he thinks as well. So to give everyone a bit of an idea, I've got Jacob on. He's from a page on Facebook I came across many years ago, offering tips to people free of charge. You get a lot of these sort of people that are recommending tips, and they're always, asking for some dollars. And Jacob's never done that. So he's always just been about, the people and trying to get the people on the better side of the bookies. And he's done a pretty good job of that over his career. So I'll pass over to you, Jacob. Why don't you tell us a little bit about TryPod and, what you do over there and what your role is.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks for having me on the show. Well, you've picked a great time to have me on because it's round 24 and round 22 and round 23 were my worst two rounds of the season for best bets. So it's a funny time to come on and tell people that I know what I'm talking about. Hopefully I do. The results this season overall have still been really good for most people. So, and it's good, glad to hear you follow along occasionally as well, including we've found a lot of good bets on TopSport, which I can see sponsors you guys as well. So I can tell your listeners that's a great bookie to have from someone that is very dedicated to punting. The TryPod began just me and my best mate, basically. We were finding a lot of winners in the group chat for our mates on the footy, and they would just started asking us, like, how did you pick that? We were kind of picking unusual picks or picking sides you wouldn't expect. And that question would always be, well, how did you come up with that? So we kind of joked around that, well, we should record our thoughts and make a podcast. And basically, like, you guys can hear not just who we're tipping this week, but why. And then it became just an audio file that we recorded for fun, sent it to some mates. A few other mates would say, hey, can you send me that file? I heard about it. And then it became, well, let's make it a Facebook page. And that was 2015 and basically has grown from that. And I mean, my friend Alex, who I did the pod with, we did last 6 seasons, but actually at the end of last year, he got an employment opportunity by Ladbrokes or GVC that owns Ladbrokes and Neds and some other betting companies. So then in 2021, I've gone solo, and it's basically a couple podcasts a week, a preview on a Wednesday night. So I've just completed that one an hour ago, and a recap on Sunday, and just me breaking down the footy from my punting perspective, and a perspective that has been successful beating the bookies for 7 years.
Yeah, I think the thing for me that I've always found really interesting is just the opportunity to listen to your thought process as well, and why you're sort of making these sort of bets. Other people who just sort of chuck a tip up that, on other pages or whatever, you sort of go, oh, okay, yeah, it looks all right. But when you're sort of breaking down why, it sort of gives a listener a bit more confidence in, why they should sort of follow that tip, I guess, as well. And for me personally, with Supercoach, I've had plenty of times this year where when you say I listen occasionally, I'm a massive worker. I've listened to you probably every week since probably 2015. So you've really influenced, me being a terrible punter to being a pretty okay punter. My problem is I don't follow all your tips. I get a little bit creative myself and still a bit of I'm just a bit guilty of trying to chase something a little bit more juicier. And the thing that I really appreciate about what you guys do is you don't go for these wild bets. You're just looking for, trying to enjoy the bet as well, but get it right. You know what I mean? So people who are chucking in all these crazy, try scorers and stuff, you guys shy away from that, which I like. And I look back to when I was, first punting, and I'd be always just picking, 1 to 12s or 13 pluses. That'd be my thing. And obviously you've got that, there's 4 different options there, and you guys seem to always nail it down to line betting mostly, what I've found, and even just looking for special things like a first half bet, like a first half line or something like that, where a lot of people usually don't have that sort of thought to think to even look for those sorts of bets, but sometimes they can be just the absolute standout ones, because you can see week after week a certain team might, really put in a good effort in the first half, but then they, decapsulate in the second half. So that's where you can sort of get behind those sort of the roughies, in the first half. So you find those bits of those gems, which I love. So other than that, you guys obviously touch on a lot of other sports as well in the off season as well. So that's something that I think people can look forward to. And that's why I sort of wanted to get you on now as well, because myself personally, I only do NRL Supercoach. I don't dilly-dally with BBL or any of the others. I'm not really too interested in it, but I will have a punt in them, even though I don't know what I'm doing. So I usually look to you guys in those sorts of things. So if people want to bet on the sports coming up, like the NFL and stuff, I got into a couple of years ago following you and Nettie as well, that was giving out some good tips. So yeah, so I just wanted people to be aware of you guys and have this as a bit of for me, it's a Bible for punting, and, it really influences my super coach decisions along the way as well. So what do you got for us this week, Jacob? What have you said? You've just done your pod. I want people to go check that out, obviously. So don't give away obviously everything, but have you got a mixed matchup for us this week? That's one of my favorite.
Yeah, I got a pretty creative one this week, actually. So the mixed matchup is a bet that you can only bet on TopSport. So another good reason for people to jump on board. And what it's been an idea that we came up with in the preseason to give interest in more than one game. And so I pick one team to outscore another team, and they don't actually play each other that round, but it's just that one side has to score more points than another side. And then the way that I pick it is I'm looking for a team. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to pick the best team like the Melbourne Storm every week, because it's all factored into the odds and how many points they're expected to score. But what I'm looking for is a team that I think is going to perform better than expectation that week. And then I'm looking for them to outscore a team that I think may perform below expectations. So a side that I think is going to prosper against a side that might struggle for several reasons, could be specific to their matchup. And we've done really well. I think we've won 70% of them, and we're getting never odds below $2 and up to $3.50. So even if we were winning half the time, we'd be making really good profit. But to be winning 70%, and we've actually won 13 of the last 14 weeks. And this one I've gone slightly creative. Yeah, kind of. So even I have to say, it doesn't feel like a sustainable clip, but it shows we're doing something right. Do you remember the Slayer Saturday tip I gave out a few weeks ago, which was the 3 big favorites on the Saturday to win kind of 60 plus?
I got on that one. Yep.
Yeah, so that was a beauty. I think it was $3.25. And it worked out well for us because we came into the final game. Penrith only needed to win by 2 points, even though they were a 20-point favourite. And in the end, that Penrith-Brisbane game was a bit closer than expected. So just as well, it worked out that way. They did make us sweat because they're up 18-0 and then Brisbane was coming for them. But this week I've gone along those same lines. So when I looked at the 8 games this week, I have a theory, with this being the penultimate regular season round, that the big guns are definitely looking to rest a lot of their key players in round 25 next week. And that'll be very pertinent for yourself, like with Supercoach as well. I'm sure you guys are aware that someone like Melbourne Storm, and Munster even said as much yesterday, could rest 10 plus stars. I think Penrith will be in the same boat, locked into second. I foresee South Sydney potentially resting a host of players. What that means for me from a punting perspective is I think this is where you empty the tank, and this is your last dress rehearsal before the finals for these key players to really kind of flex their muscles, and for the not so much key players, but the fringe players in all these teams to cement their spot. If you imagine you're playing for the Storm and you're on the bench, or you're not one of the Origin players, I mean, they've got so much depth. It's really a battle for spots. Everyone wants to be in the 17 on grand final day, right? So where I'm getting at is I think that these big guns, and I've narrowed it down to the Storm, Manly, Penrith, and who am I missing? Souths as well, will all have big performances this week. So I have those 4 teams beating their opponents by more than 90 points this weekend. So that's actually my mixed matchups. So they don't even necessarily all have to win, but the amount that they all outscore their opponents by to be 91 or more. So I know it sounds a little convoluted, but basically you get that number by adding up the 4 lines. And we've got a couple of these lines up to 30. So, people who aren't that much into punting. The line is like the handicap or the head start. So clearly that's the kind of line you get when you get a total mismatch like Manly versus the Bulldogs this weekend, or Penrith against a hapless Tigers side. So I often don't like to bet on these big favourites because it is a bit obvious. It's kind of what you said before, where I come at it from a different angle. I'm not necessarily trying to pick what's really likely, because what's really likely doesn't win long term, because Joe on the street can pick what's really likely, and he can pick the Melbourne Storm to win every week, but he's not beating the bookies. So we do need to be a bit smarter about how we do it. But specifically in these circumstances this week, I think it gives us a huge opportunity for some really big mismatches, and for some of these big sides to not take their foot off the pedal, because you really want to play for 80 to get into finals mode. That's the way I see a lot of these games going. For example, the Storm, I don't think they're going to relent at all against Parramatta. You've got to remember, even West Tigers beat Penrith earlier this year, so there's a bit of revenge factor. Last time Manly played the Bulldogs, it was 66-0 just in one game, and Turbo's back this weekend. So there's a lot to like. So that's only paying $2, which is actually the lowest. I'm glad you like it. So that's the lowest odds I would give for a mixed matchup. But I think it's well better than a 50-50. So coming back to what you said, where I don't go out of my way to pick same game multis, or like first try scorers and things like that. It's not that I don't want to. I understand heaps of people love to bet that way. It's just my experience. I find that long term, the way that the odds are set up on those markets, there is a significant edge to the bookie. It's very hard to overcome. Whereas what I try and bet is always on two-way markets. So a two-way market is like a line or a total, where there's only two options. You can see the price for one happening or the other, so they can't just rip you off on one side of it. And then once I kind of have a feeling of how I think a match is going to go, then I try and dive into that, as you said. Do I think they could exert this edge even more if I just play it in the first half, or slight iterations as well? Always just trying to find the best value. But mixed matchup on TopSport, if people who follow your show are interested in that. What I think about, the reason I like to create these markets is to add fun. It's like you don't have to have a punt on 4 different games. Just throw your bet down for the round, and you get to cheer, and it's kind of fun cheering the big favorites and cheering them run in all these tries. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We were like, it doesn't happen every week for me. Sometimes I'm on the ugliest of ducklings, and I'm on the Bulldogs, and I'm hoping they're scoring. It's not that much fun. But there are certain weeks where I think I'm finding value on the favorites, and they're fun because you get to support the best teams going around, and hopefully we'll get the rewards doing that.
Yeah, totally. Well, I really like that one. I do think that there's like at least 2 games there that could be easily a 40-point margin in themselves, which is 80 points there. So to just get to 91, I think is really achievable, even if you even bring those back to 30 for, I think 3 of those could be 30. And then the other one, you've just got there for a little bit of insurance, I think. So you're pretty confident with the Rabbitohs, obviously, to beat the
Rabbitohs. I do think they'll win, and I think the fact they've come off like a frustrating loss last week, they want to get that winning feeling. And if I'm right that they will rest quite a few key players next week, then they've got to kind of do it this week. And they've still named a very strong squad. I don't know if you guys discussed like whether or not you expect Damien Cook to play, but for me, it's not like a deal breaker. I still think even if he gets a rest, they're still going to be really strong. Whereas the Roosters have Lockie Lamb playing in the centers. Like they're really stretched thin with injuries and suspensions. So, and the other thing is I actually do question how desperate the Roosters will be. I know it's an age-old rivalry, but I mean, we saw a year ago in the final round, the Roosters mailed in that game against the Bunnies where they got beat, 60-10 or whatever it was, because they had their sights set a little bit further afield. And I just think the Roosters are all about making sure they got a strong squad that's going to take the, step on the park come finals time, and are not necessarily going to be all in desperation this weekend. Of the 4 teams that I mentioned, that's the only one that I could, wouldn't be shocked if there's an upset. Like it's possible, but the beauty is even if there was an upset, the beauty is, as you said, like, we could get, exactly. We could make up the 90 between the other 3 as well. And if the Bunnies do get on top and get the weight of possession, which they didn't get against Penrith, they are actually so silky, so crisp to watch, and they could actually run up a score, and then we could have our noses well ahead, and it could be an easy watch over the weekend. Here's hoping.
So just wanted to touch on, obviously, that you've got it. You'll have some other best bets available, which will encourage people to go over and check over on your bet, your pod, which is available like today. It's probably out now, yeah.
Right, yeah, it premiered on YouTube literally
You
an
went
hour
live?
ago, and at Facebook, and then but if people prefer listening, are you guys the same? Is it video and audio?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
we
the
are.
same with the tripod. Sorry, I have to confess I'm not a listener, and it's only because
No.
just time constraints. I would love fantasy, like I would love Super Coach. Like I've got the mind like that really enjoys that and enjoys the stats. It's just if I ever tried to do it, I would get too conflicted. I don't know if you have that experience where you've like
Yeah, I do.
punted on a game, but then you got like 5 different players and you want him to do well, you want him to not do well or whatever. It just
you want
like
this
kind
team
of
to win.
overloads the
Yeah.
mind. Yeah.
That's
So that's where I draw the line. Yep.
Yeah, I found most of the year I've been like, oh, my bet's not going good, and I'd have an amazing week on Supercoach, but then I'd be just no, I'd still have the shits. But anyway, so I'm really glad you don't play Supercoach because I think you'd be pretty much up there. Like I think the way your mind thinks and the way you analyze things, I think I'd be in trouble this year if you were playing. So maybe give it a go next year, man. I think it'll be a walk in the park for you, even as a rookie player. So maybe consider it. See you can spend a little bit of time on it. You don't have to put your whole.
I'd love to do it. I'd love to do it one stage. I mean, Alex and we got into NFL fantasy football, which I'm sure overlaps with a lot of Supercoach fans. If they like their American sport, they might play fantasy football. And the NFL season started up in a week or two. And we made a league with like our mates that are all into NFL. And I think Alex won it the very first year playing, and then I won it the next year because we do just love love that aspect of it as well. But found it a bit too much to have on the plate. But I would love to play Supercoach as well for sure. And I'm fascinated by the theory as well and trying to pick out who's going to do well and who's not. And there's definitely a good overlap. So it's cool that plenty of people love playing Supercoach and love having a punt as well.
And finally, just an opinion from you. Obviously, you don't have a crystal ball or, probably much closer insight to the actual clubs and what's going on. But you did mention you think that the Storm, Panthers, Bunnies will be rested. Obviously, their positions are going to be pretty much locked up next week. Is there specific players that you think are certainties to be rested next week?
So, I mean, your first assumption would be the Storm will beat Parramatta, because if that didn't happen, it actually would keep the minor premiership up for grabs. So there is that kind of caveat. But assuming that, you just look at the Storm, we could pretty much say anybody who played Origin and plus maybe a couple of their internationals like Jesse Bromwich, probably Jesse and Kenny Bromwich. But the only guys I think may not rest would be the guys that need to get the match fitness. So whether someone like Nelson, Dale Finucane, guys that have been out, maybe even Pappenhausen could play because they want to get the miles in the legs. See, that's an interesting one because he's played off the bench a bit. So that's one it'd be hard to guess what Bellamy's thinking with that, because as I made the point on my pod, it's like it's an energy thing. So if you give them a rest off, like the week off, the energy levels are higher in the finals. It's also in any of these games, any incident can be a suspension. And of course, you can cop a knock any time. And it could be an injury. And you would hate to lose a key player in a game that you didn't need to win. So that's why I think what we saw out of the Storm last year, we saw the blueprint as they played virtually nobody in the final game of the season to the Dragons. And we actually profited from that punting as well. We had the Dragons plus 16.5, hearing on the radio that Bellamy was going to rest the whole team. And then sure enough, by the time the game kicked off, Dragons were favourites. So I think the bookies will be a little bit more cottoned onto that this year because they got their pants pulled down on that last year. So hard for specifics. I mean, South, like Latrell, Cody Walker, Adam Reynolds, they'd be the kind of candidates, as well as a couple of the rep forwards like Cam Murray. And Penrith would be the interesting one where they've got some key players that have only just come back in the last month. I still think it would be prudent for them to sit guys like Cleary, Luai, Coruscant out for the game next week potentially. So yeah, it could throw a bit of a spanner in the works for Supercoach, for tipping, and it could even impact who makes the finals. I think someone like Cronulla, who is going to play the Storm in the final game of the season, everyone looked at the schedule and thought, well, they're not going to win that. They may get handed a victory if Bellamy doesn't want to go for it. So it is an interesting one, and it is it does make for a really interesting final couple of rounds of the regular season.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate your insight. I'm sure a lot of people will be on that mixed matchup. That sounds like an exciting one to be on for the weekend. But definitely, guys, jump over to the TryPod page. Give it a follow. Yeah, I check it out weekly, and I'd really encourage you guys to, before placing your bet, have a bit of a listen. And yeah, I mean, the numbers just speak for themselves. Jacob's like hitting some crazy numbers, like, I think it's like 67% on your best bets or something like that. And then
67% it was a fortnight ago. But as I said, we've gone on a bit of a slide, but we're still above 60%, which is, kind of like a holy grail number for sports betting when you're betting against the line. So still pretty happy with that, even though I'm feeling the heat. As I said, kind of funny week to come on your show, but hopefully I've been putting the work every week. I'm still pretty confident that we'll recover from that and we'll still make it a great year. So yeah, I appreciate all the kind words as well, Tim. And thanks for having me on again.
Awesome, man. Hopefully you guys got something good out of this, and always remember to bet responsibly. But if you are betting, bet with TryPod. With TopSport. Obviously, don't bet with TryPod. You should start your own bookie. You'd kill it, man. But if you are betting, bet with TopSport and use the code SuperCoachExperience. That way they'll know you're one of our listeners and they'll take good care of you. All right, thanks, Jacob. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Tim.
Would anybody like some pound cake? I'd like some pound cake. Some cake. I'd like some pound cake. Some cake. Some pound cake. Some cake. Some cake. I'd like some pound cake. Some cake. I'd like some pound cake. Some cake. I'd like some pound cake. Some cake. Some pound cake. Some cake. I'd like some pound cake. Some I'd like pound cake. Some cake. I'd like some pound cake. Some cake. Some pound cake. Some cake. I'd like some pound cake. Some cake. Cake. I found cake. Some cake. I like some pound cake. Some cake. Some pound cake. Some cake. I like some pound cake. Some cake. I like some pound cake.